Um, I'm the Prime Minister. I don't know. My pronouns are he, him, and I will only take verbal POIs. My speech will start in three, two, one. Judge, imagine you as a little girl sexually abused for a long time, and your sexual offender is in a prison suffering for maybe 20 or 30 years, just in prison, getting fed because they have nothing left, and your criminal is suffering from only 30 years, and there is a possibility that he comes out and actually abuses you again, or rehabilitation, or you cannot imagine the possibility of him reoccurring these also crimes, and where we think that you, judge, as a little girl, should not be actually supporting this motion, and we think that we should have the experience, constant experience of their suffering instead of these in jail. Okay. I also said framing before two arguments. Like morality does not matter when the morality was already violated, abused, and done wrong in the first place. So proud to propose. Okay, six pieces of framing here. What does the status quo look like? The perpetrators that commit these heinous crimes go to jail not knowing what they did wrong, with no sympathy to the victims. They do not try to understand and do not understand the victim's pain. They are not sorry of what they have done and is not going to be in jail. People who have years out of prison has a high percentage to do it again. There's no rehabilitations for these criminals, and the CJS is falling to enforce justice and protect the future victims from these perpetrators. And trust of the CJS is falling when these people should be believing on their CJS and believing on their government's enforcement to actually safely and carry out and actually give out moral justice actively to these perpetrators that are sexually abusing and doing these heinous crimes over and over and over. We think that CJ has a very massive burden in this debate to deliver these moral justice. So one, what are heinous crimes? We identify heinous crimes as are extreme crimes as like serial killers, extreme harassment, and great domestic abuse, actually causing a very big societal a wave to what these crimes are. And two, who are these criminals that do heinous crimes? Criminals who do not feel sympathy, likely to be psychopaths, who are not familiar with the pain others suffer, with lack of understanding. And this is why they commit these crimes that actually do not think about the others, the victims suffering. Three, who are the victims? Lost a loved one or a survivor from such a heinous crime, like sexually abused child or people who are disabled and lost their lives because of these perpetrators that want these perpetrators to actually have an active suffering or an active moral justice punishment. The CDAS right now is their main incentive for heinous crimes is punish them severely with moral justice to civilians and deterrence with that this should not happen from these civilians and rehabilitations for people who actually work for these. Five, what does this experience of suffering look like? What is our policy? A, the crime you did is now done to you by technology, most accurate and safe and way done as possible to how you did. For example, if you are a man and you yelled and slapped harshly, the machine would enact your voice and slap you as hard as you can, reenacting the experience that the victim should have gone through. B, the quantity is doubled, like meaning if you are sexually offending a child for 3 months, you get offended for 6 months. Actually, understanding that severity of what this like the matter of CJS if the absence of CJS should have caused and what you would have done if the CJ was not there. See, after the experience, a psychologist will test their mental state to see if they have the ability and moral judgment to act responsibility in the real world, not just go out and be like, oh, I just suffered once and I'm going to commit the crime again. This would not happen in the debate. So what is the trade-off of our argument? We're trading off the immortality of this torture or experience with the right justice served and the practicality of this policy. Long-term benefit lies on of our side. Okay, before I move on, I'll take up UI. Three, two, one. Okay, our first argument is
UI.
morality. I'll take it.
Okay, so assuming that the motion states suffering of their victims, which means that the suffering has to be equal as what the victims have experienced. Please engage.
Okay, my second speaker will elaborate more on this point. Okay. Our first argument is morality and justice. The premise of this argument is that we enforce moral justice to these victims and create genuine moral accountability for the perpetrators by this technology. First mechanism in this point, traditional prisons are not actually like success on this goal. Traditional prisons often fails to make offenders fully understand the harm they did. Many perpetrators emotionally distance themselves from these crimes, not knowing what they did or just trying to ignore what they did and moving on with their life. B, the free food, clothes, and living does not seem too bad for people who have nothing to lose, who have nothing to that are left in their lives, who are sexual, like or who are perpetrators that are actually psychopaths and who have nothing to lose. These food and free food and clothes and living does not seem too bad and is not a moral enough punishment for these heinous criminals. See, there are examples like Hitler that has been in jail for years and years and writes books of how he shouldn't be there and how like what he would do if he goes out and what like his situation is. These are not proper responses of rehabilitation or what they or like genuine like being sorry. This is not what we are looking like, and that is why traditional prisons fail to actually punish these heinous criminals. Two, second mechanization. Why is props world better? Why is our world actually doing what the traditional prisons are not doing to these heinous criminals? A, we force perpetrators to experience the victim's suffering and create genuine moral accountability to these criminals. B, when, for example, sexual harassment was their crime, they will feel with what it feels like how to be with no consent and no responsibility, and how the weak feels, how the vulnerable feels, how the victim should have felt when they actually had this crime, forcing them to understand what the victim had went through. See, the sudden realization or recognition of weak would make them more reconsider the feelings of the victims, making them ultimately having a better and these heinous psychopaths won't be a brute cold criminal. They will learn and acknowledge what the weak is and who the weak is in the situation. Third mechanization. This aligns punishment with the actual harm inflicted rather than an arbitrary prison sentence. This isn't a far away, long-lasting situation that this directly connects with the crime that they have made. B, better solution for the criminal justice system to actually give moral justice on these people and actually do rehabilitation to these heinous criminals and psychopaths who don't understand their crime in the status quo. Okay, for some impact analysis before the next argument, there will be less victim suffering happening in our world because of these extreme suffering happening and the moral justice well done for these from these criminal justice system. The second argument, which is reduction of reoffending, the premise of the argument is a major reason people commit violent crimes again is the lack of empathy for victims. Experiencing the victim suffering forces offenders to directly understand trauma, fear, and pain. Psychological studies show empathy building in interventions and reduce astrocycle behavior. And first mechanization, which is recurring. Many violent offenders commit crimes because they dehumanize their victims. They see victims as objects, enemies, or people whose pains does not matter. They use a psychological distance to justify their actions. When offenders are forced to experience the victim suffering directly, they disappear. They feel the fear, helplessness, and trauma. When the perpetrators actually feel the weak and vulnerable, they learn how to connect with the feelings more. And that is why we will have better rehabilitations in our world, because the perpetrator actually understands, and the deterrence and the fear of the weak and the vulnerable will actually be in their mind. I am very proud to propose.
All right, thanks. First prop, inviting first up.
Just give me a few seconds. Thank you. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so I prefer my POIs verbally, and my pronouns are she, her, and start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels. Imagine a pedophile experiencing what the government view as a mechanism, which we already did wrong. I'll explain it furthermore. Would they really realize and actually connect with what they did is actually wrong? Or would they think that, oh, that girl should be thankful for what I did for her because of all these things that girl should be thankful for what I did to her. Few rebuttals on their side of the case. Few strategic call-outs, right? Firstly, on their mechanism, which they talked about how that specific technology is going to double down on the period of time or the punishment that is given to the criminals themselves. We tell you that this is not engaging with the motion when the motion clearly states that the perpetrators of heinous crimes to experience the suffering of their victims, not doubling down the suffering of their victims. So lack of engagement in that and wrong mechanism done by first speaker of side government. And also, they also use sexual harassment as an example constantly throughout their whole speech, which I fail to see why exactly is it heinous crimes. If we were to make a best case scenario and stand on a fair ground, we would most likely take into comparison and take into consideration of more serious crimes, for example, like raping and also murdering crimes. And also, thirdly, they talk about how jail on our side is not rehabilitation center because it doesn't give the punishment that's strong enough. Number one, jail as a rehabilitation center is not giving as much punishment as they should be. It's giving criminals a second chance to think twice about what they've done and whether giving them a chance whether they want to redeem themselves and realize what they did is wrong or not, instead of just giving as much punishment as they can to the criminals themselves. And also, most importantly, where they already get their mechanism wrong to begin with, where they want to double down, some family members or victims don't get closure by seeing their criminals go through what they've did before. Maybe they're just going through and looking by what they actually did and redeem that experience as a trophy to what they actually did, letting them be a memorial experience for them. And also, they talk about how on our side of the house, people who went to jail have higher percentage of doing it again. We tell you that is really wrong. It is unrealistic where because these criminals have been through physical and mental pain in jail, which is not an easy way out comparing to the technology that exists on site government. Plus, we tell you that there's a higher percentage of these criminals doing it again on government side because we tell you, Judge, on their side is way worse because this machine is not only deemed as the easy way out, but it's also not giving the closure that should have been given to the victim and also the close one of the victim themselves, which I will furthermore elaborate throughout my first argument. And also, few characterization that first speaker has failed to characterize to all of us. So firstly, closure. We heard that closure is very much needed when someone is unable to let go of the past. This closure is especially important to maintain the equality and stability of a specific society. And also, second way, experiencing the suffering. We see this experiencing and suffering through this technology is a easy way out, which the criminal will be given right now, and they don't get the mental and physical punishment, especially when first speaker of side government already gave us a wrong mechanism. So I'll explain the mechanism. A clear mechanism between both sides is non-negotiable, is that on their side, they'll go through trials, they'll still go through final results of redeeming their guilty or not guilty, and they will get the suffering equally as what the victim have gotten through the technology, and no jail time is even given once they got the pain and then they're done with it. Whereas on our side of the house, we tell you that we also go through trials, we also get the final results whether they're not guilty or not guilty, but we tell you that they get the suffering through jail time, which is how they live. They are pressured to live within a community that did equally heinous crimes. They are fearing for their life to not get killed with all these criminals that they are living with every single day. And exclusively on our side, which government side do not have, we give a second chance for all these criminals to change. As jail is also known as a rehab center, as I already elaborated in my rebuttals to begin with. So what is the mechanism and incentive for criminals to not even continue to commit heinous crimes on government side was never really explained by the first speaker. Therefore, we already win in this case. Now, onto our burden of proof, right? We have a few burden of proof that we are able to prove to you. If we're able to achieve those three things, we win. Number one, which side is able to give closure to the victims or the close one of the victims? Secondly, which side is able to give a second chance for these individuals to redeem themselves? If not, they will still face through the consequences. And also thirdly, which side is able to maintain the equality of a society by reducing as much resentment and hate within society as possible. Our final stance today is improving the well-being of society. But before that, is there any POI before I go into my arguments? 3, 2, 1. Assuming there's none, now moving on to my argument, where I prove to you, Judge, why we are able to achieve closure, right? Onto our first layer, where we tell you that why is closure important? We tell you that heinous crime most importantly involves traumatization towards victim, for example, like raping and also murdering, or even the loss of an individual in society. These kind of crimes cause a specific and impactful effect in society. Closure of victims' close one is very important because people want to see the consequences done towards the criminal, but not wanting them to double down and experiencing what they did, double the punishment. Therefore, onto the first clash, where the yardstick on this argument would be whether which side is able to give closure. Onto my second layer, where we give a comparison between both sides, right? We tell you that on our side of house, on their side of house, there's two possible case scenarios. Number one, where the criminals suffer through the technology that exists, it will normally be deemed as an easy way out. Why so? Because the criminals getting the punishment is voluntarily doing the heinous action towards an innocent individual, whereas no matter what, on their side of house, the criminals get punished through this technology, and the pain is not as equal because they are not innocent to begin with. And also, number two, they might not be viewing this as a punishment. They might be viewing this as a memorable act. And also, second case scenario on their side of house, which is we take their best case scenario into consideration. Right? 1 second, I'll take you onto this. Best case on their side of best case scenario, right? Criminals suffer through this technology that exists, and they really get the most pain out of it somehow. But some victims, they don't get closure through seeing another suffer. They get closure through seeing someone has promised to change. Someone is now able to look back and see what they done with what they did is wrong and is able to apologize to the victim themselves. Government have to understand that there are times violence shouldn't be treated with more violence. Thereas we tell you that your mechanism is wrong, and there's we are able to prove to you that we have the explicit advantage of giving closure to our victims on our side house. Before that, share your POI.
Go. When the criminal suffers from a serious heinous crime that they have committed, even though they did not put consent on that, wouldn't that be concerning to actually happen again and again and again? That stops recurring.
Okay, number one, yes, we agree that it is concerning to happen again and again. Therefore, we tell that on our side, when we put them into jail, we give them a second chance to actually change and allow them to have the ability to realize what they did is wrong and maybe have the chance to apologize to the victims themselves. Even if they did not change and they decide to double down in the jail and decide to continue doing these actions, they will still face the consequences. And this time, having the record they did before that, leading to way worse punishment that already exists in status quo, which we on our side we stand. For example, like life sentence, death penalty. These kind of actions still exist on our side of the house. We tell that we understand these traumas that is gone through by all these women that's going through rape and these kind of stuff. But we tell you, panels, when these pedophiles go through the same pain that these women are experiencing, are they really feeling the pain, or are they really memorizing what they've done and viewing this as the trophy of what they've done? Therefore, we tell three outcomes of our side of the house. Number one, we don't let criminals get the easy way out of this because it is not deemed as an easy way. They have to suffer through these jail time that they are given. Number two, we don't let society deplete by having all this resentment and revenge that Emma will further elaborate. And also number three, creating better individuals by giving them a chance to change by having an equal consequence that they deserve and also giving them a chance to change in their life. Therefore, so proud to oppose.
All right, I'd like to thank the first speaker of the opposition for their speech and call the second proposition speaker.
Can I just have 30 seconds, please? Thank you. Okay, pronouns are she, her, and I only take verbal POIs. Okay. Wait, I'm unmuted. Just go with paper. Okay. Okay, just wait a second, please. Sorry. Okay. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Morality doesn't matter when the morality was already violated, abused, and done wrong in the first place. So proud to propose. Now, moving on to rebuttals before I start my argument. All the first speaker tells you in this debate or in their speech is that, oh, it's concerning that events are going to happen again, but then jail provides you a second chance. And jail does it less harsh, so then it's going to not repeat. If I prove you why that jail is less harsh, therefore it's going to repeat again, then we ultimately take this debate entirely. Now, 5 pieces of rebuttal here. A, they criticize on our model, saying that, oh, motion only stated suffering, but actually motion only stated suffering, not equal suffering. We do the same type of suffering, but we do more. B, even if we say that, okay, it's same type and same amount, they still get the pain and the disgust and the experience. So then it doesn't matter. Our model is just going to be harsher. That doesn't impact both sides. It's just symmetrical. But C, they frame jail as it doesn't give much harshness. They frame saying that, oh, jail doesn't give much harshness. They give a second chance. But then after they rebut to our case by saying that, oh, the harshness of our side doesn't make them realize what they're wrong because they're so disgusting and they're criminals. Judge, see this contradiction right here. Because prisons are actually less harsher than the pain that we give to these perpetrators on our side. So then their side would have actually less realization compared to our side, because if they say that, okay, look, their side has harshness, but then they're going to repeat again because the criminals don't realize. But then their side is actually less harsher, giving them more second chances. Then wouldn't the realization come later on and less on their side? Look at the contradiction. But D, our pain is an easy. They say that, okay, our pain is an easy way out with no mental and physical suffering. But if you want suffering on your side, but prisons actually are less harsh, like you said. So I don't know what they're criticizing on, because again, they're contradicting themselves because they're trying to bring our case down by saying, okay, look, they are so harsh, but then they don't do anything and it's going to repeat again. But then their case is literally saying our side is less harsh, so it's better. But then they contradict our side by saying less harsh. So I don't know the comparison here. And secondly, lastly, they say that, okay, prisons are less harsh. And then the metric here, and then they say that our side is less harsh, so then it won't work. Okay, that doesn't really makes sense, the opposition. The metric here is that prisons have treatments that you can get. You have the quality of life except freedom. And you get a second chance, like opposition said. Versus on our side, we get suffering, we get the experience. That means that I prove to you why prisons are less harsh. That means that, okay, and then they say that even if they get out, they'll do it again, they face consequence, and then they face consequences again. These victims don't want the crime to repeat. Why are they giving you second chances to harm again? Please engage. Now, moving on to my extension on rehabilitation would be more effective on our side. The experience of experience. 2 points here. A, because the criminal realizes what they have done and the fear of recurring of his own crime himself, the criminal would constrain himself for his own good. B, most importantly, the way of sympathy that should exist on a normal person makes the rehab more possible than just long jail time. And by meaning rehab, we mean the suffering experience. Then let me prove to you why the recurrence of these crimes are lower on our side because of 2 reasons. 1, our policy. Two layers here. A, we ensure that before release to society, you get offended until you truly understand what you did and what caused in the long term. B, empathy can increase because the offender actually goes through the experience that they did, that they know how disgusting it is, that they know what can happen, and that they know how uncomfortable it is. 2, prisons don't generally work as it is less harsh. A, these perpetrators are likely to going to repeat their crime again when they get released unless they are in prison forever. They are likely to going to repeat. Opposition responds by saying, okay, even if they repeat, they get our consequences. But then the victims are going to get, are you trying to get more victims on your side? Because I don't think that's what the debate should look like. B, prisons can spark further ideas, giving us backlash. We can see this by literally Hitler called Mein Kampf, or Jeffrey Epstein repeating his crime for decades. Now, moving on to the third argument on psychological safety of victims. The premise lies here by saying if victims never truly feel safe after getting offended, they experience severe PTSD, they experience depression or anxiety or even sleep insomnia. Even family members of the victims literally want the offender to be literally dead after what the victim went through. Then three pieces of mechanization to prove this why. One, many victims feel prison does not do anything but stop them for short term. Then A, why is this true? Many studies and situations have shown that these mental perpetrators are likely going to repeat their crime after they've been released from prison. B, for example, let me prove Jeffrey Epstein. He sexually abused little women for decades and didn't stop until he literally died after many years of prison. C, what does this mean for victims? They never actually truly feel safe as they probably think prisons are ineffective for these serious perpetrators. And we can see that opposition saying that, oh, even if this is true, the crimes are likely going to repeat. Two, they want a payback revenge, not provision of bed, food, and some entertainment. A, then what does this prison actually look like and what is its job in the first place? Three pieces here. One, prison were built in the first place for humans that cannot follow the law and act responsibly to hold them from the rest of society and exclude them. Two, because of the morality of holding them back from society, now in the status quo, depending on their actions, prison time extends or decreases. Three, prisons still have everything you would have in your house because of morality and human rights, except freedom. Yet you still have inmates, food, a bed, a television, access to outside people sometimes. Then B, what does this mean for victims? Victims think this treatment is unacceptable. They lost trust in the government and the Cultural Justice Department to act responsibly. Therefore, they never feel safe and their mental health goes down. Secondly, they do not think this treatment is fair. Why? Because all the perpetrators get is just good treatment with the little bit less of freedom while they got hurt. They have long-lasting impact while victims they last
POI?
until it's dead. I'd like to take your POI.
So do you assume that the treatment in jail is actually as good as not being in jail?
No, because you have less freedom. That's the whole point of jail. But I'm saying that on our side, the treatment is more harsh. Therefore, that the victims will have more realization and they are less likely to going to repeat their crime. Then third mechanization here, they feel safer with the experience of suffering. A, why? Judge, you got kidnapped by this huge man and you were tortured in his house, tied on ropes and taped on mouths for 2 months. He tortured you, used you, made you suffer to the point where you thought you would be better dead than to live in torture in hell like this. You finally got out of this experience. You still have traumas. You still cannot sleep properly. You still cannot be alone. Would you want this offender to go through the same thing you did with the likelihood of no repetition? Or would you want them to rot in a few years in prison with not knowing if they reflected or not knowing if they're going to repeat or not? Obviously, you want the same treatment. Families feel safer because your daughter got offended by this horrible, devilish man. That means that you would want the horrendous man to get away from society a little more and get suffered the same way your daughter suffered. So proud to propose and thank.
I would like to thank the second speaker for prop, and I would like to invite the second speaker for the opposition.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
So I'm second speaker for side opposition, Emma. I'll be accepting my POIs verbally, and my pronouns are whatever you want to call me. Okay. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, a few things we want to clear out in this entire debate before we go into my rebuttals or even my arguments first. So, first of all, let's talk about what jail is like. So, on their side, all they gave us is that jail is not harsh and it's useless and it's bad for rehabilitation. So, let's go into what jail actually is before we go into anything else, which because it correlates to everything in this entire debate. So first of all, jail is a rehabilitation center basically, and it's also where people who done like heinous crimes get their punishment. And when we're talking about heinous crimes, keep in mind that these people are going to get life sentences. When we talk about heinous crimes, they're either going to get life sentences or their sentences are going to be harsher than usual. Okay, so they're not going to be staying there for just 5 years. It'll be 10, 20, and even if they come out, because you've been to jail, you're going to be blacklisted. You have very few opportunity to be able to get work. Your image is ruined, and there's a reason why people won't want to go in jail. So there's also a mental toll on these perpetrators when they go to jail. They, first of all, number one, they don't have any privacy at all unless they're in the toilet. And even if they're in the toilet, usually in jails, they are monitored 24/7 by police. And there's also a chance that, and most likely, because other inmates are as psychopathic as you are probably going to get bullied. If you're a pedophile, you're going to get raped by other inmates. The police don't care what happens to you because you're a criminal. You are basically the bottom of the society. You're not even poor. You're way worse than the people who are considered poor. You're suffering a way worse life. And on your side, you're trying to downplay the fact that, oh, they get basic needs. If that's the case, why wouldn't every single poor person just do a crime and get into jail? Okay, so with that cleared out, let's get into my rebuttals. So, on side government, first speaker, they characterize perpetrators as psychopaths, and yes, we agree with this. These perpetrators are doing heinous crimes, and you have to be a psychopath or someone with some kind of
You know what?
obsession rejected to be able to like commit this heinous crimes. Okay, you're not a normal person. Nobody in your right mind would do these crimes. So first of all, when you say on our side, if they go to jail, they won't understand or even care about the extent of the crimes. How is it on your side you're able to achieve that when you already characterize them as psychopaths who don't care?
You know what?
Both plans rejected. And these perpetrators on your side, we have less time to actually process what they did in the first place, because in jail, usually you get even worse punishment. You are bullied for the rest of your life if you get a life sentence. And even if you stay there for 20 years, you're going to get bullied for those 20 years you stay in there. You're not going to get the basic needs. You get food and water. That food and water comes out 2 times a day, and you will be starving most of the time. It is not enough. And they don't starve you to death, but they do give you basic needs like food and water, but it's not going to be enough. You're never going to have any joy in jail, okay? So on your side, it's way worse. Why? Because in jail, at least they're going to stay there for at least 10 years. The lowest sentence you can get is at least 10 years to be able to process this crime you did. On your side, you say that, oh, you gave us the example of rejected. So on your side, you give us the example where if this guy bullies this girl for 3 months, they get 6 months of punishment. Let's say that's possible, and we choose to use your mechanism. It is still way less time on your side, and the perpetrators are more likely to come out of jail and get revenge on the victims instead of actually getting time to process what has happened and think like, okay, maybe what I've done is wrong. Let's say, okay, these perpetrators maybe have some kind of heart, even if they're a psychopath. Okay, even if they have some kind of heart and they go out to society, it's way worse for them still, because now if they want to change themselves, everything is against them. They have no way to get into work field. And if you want like fair trial, it is not there. You don't have any fairness on your side. And sometimes because people experience pain at a different level, these perpetrators might be able to experience this suffering as something that's little to them, while the victims experience this suffering as way worse, and it stays with them even longer. Your punishment is temporary. Our punishment stays with them for the rest of their life. Okay, so moving on to my argument, I'll bring in 2 arguments today. First of all, about rehabilitation, which is first speaker has touched on your side. So I'll separate this into 2 parts, where we have perpetrators who did it willingly and perpetrators who didn't do it willingly. Okay, so to the people who did it willingly, we are basically saying that they killed because they wanted to, and they should have some. And on your side, you're saying that they should have this punishment because it is way worse, even though they won't be able to learn anything. And you on your side, you're trying to help us because you already explained that they're psychopaths. They won't be able to learn anything. They don't care. They're psychopaths. Okay, they're not normal people. They don't reflect. Do you think Jeffrey Dahmer, when he went
UI.
came out rejected, do you think Jeffrey Dahmer, let's take your example, if he went to jail and he came out, do you think he gave any care of what happened to his victims? No, he probably forgot about them. He doesn't care. These people are narcissists and people who are able to commit crimes so serious that it affects someone's entire life. Okay, so when we give them punishment like in jail, they won't be allowed in society for the rest of their life, most likely because they're getting life sentences. And the jail is the only possible solution for this, because if you let them out quickly, if you let them out after they've experienced the suffering of their victims, they will more likely get the incentive to, okay, I want to get revenge on these people who tried
UI.
to hurt me. Okay, accepted.
Do you think then all perpetrators in this debate will last in jail for their entirety of their life?
Okay, I already said that before, where I say that even if they go into jail, it's not going to be a light sentence. Even when you deal drugs, it's already a 5-year sentence. How do you think it is for heinous crimes? It's at least 20, at least 50, and at least 100. And there's more of a chance that the victims will be able to go to trial and ask the judge to give them a heavier sentence. And if their crimes are actually that heinous, they're not gonna get a light sentence. Okay, so let's go on to the next part, where the perpetrators who didn't do it willingly. On your side, these perpetrators will never get the rehabilitation that they need, and you give these perpetrators no time to process what they have done actually. And these people, when they go out, normally, if we bring them into jail, the people will forget about them, and then we have a more peaceful society. Even if the victims live in fear, even if they go into society and the victims live in fear, we give the victims more time to heal. We also give the perpetrators more time to process what is happening actually, and we give society to actually get back on their feet and experience, okay, someone did this, we should stop doing this. The after effects of the sentence, however, on your side, you are failing to protect the victim and you endanger them instead. Because instead of jail, they get out way faster on your side. And most likely, because you're characterized as criminals and they're able to do these heinous crimes, they're more likely to do the crime again, even because they're psychopaths, and they are more likely to get revenge on the victims. So on your side, victims will live in fear for the rest of their life. And on your side, basically, there is no closure on any party. The victims will never have closure on what they want to achieve. And then the perpetrators will also not have any closure, because they are going to resent the victim and they're going to try to find a way to hurt the victim again. So on our side, we firmly believe that more violence will not solve the violence that we have already caused. More trauma will not solve the trauma you already have. Okay, so even if, let's say, the perpetrator is a good person, when they get so quickly, nobody will respect them, and then they won't have any any proper living in the future. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second up, inviting the third proposition speaker.
I will only be taking verbal POIs. I will not be looking at the chat for POIs. And with that being said, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. First of all, we are defending a justice system where punishment directly reflects the harm inflicted. And instead of allowing perpetrators to hide behind prison sentences that often fail to make them confront what they did, our policy forces them to experience the suffering they caused. However, opposition, by contrast, is defending a system where perpetrators serve time but can remain emotionally distant from the consequences of their crimes. Rebutting to their part about closure and the lack of identification for the criminals, the opposition lacks the identification of who the criminals we are talking about. A, the criminals are heinous criminals, which our first speaker already explained and mechanized why they will be psychopaths and feel no empathy. B, by saying that jail time will actually help the criminals acknowledge what they did does not stand. And C, even with the lifetime punishment given because of the heinous crime, they will rule as king because of their power and nothing to lose for them, as they have no life outside of jail. D, they will have no recognition of what they did wrong because these are psychopaths and do not feel the major incentive of CJAs, which is rehabilitation. And E, by choosing the easiest way of lifetime punishment, they lose rehabilitation entirely with the moral justice. Also, clarifying on how they responded to us by saying jail is not like the status quo and it's more torture, you are going to get raped by your enemies. Well, first of all, this is ridiculous because jail have restrictions and guards, and even if jails are somehow like this, our side is still harsher as both sides literally admit it, and which means that the suffering and the experience is harsher here. See, their second speaker comes saying all perpetrators will last in jail for the entirety of their lifetime, and that is simply uncharitable, and they won't be able to learn anything. Lastly, then they switch their words saying it's going to a long jail time, but they will get released and then they never prove to us why they won't repeat when they literally say jail is less harsher. Lastly, Judge opposition simply doesn't understand what realization and empathy is. They say these perpetrators are psychologically ill, so our side won't get realization and won't learn anything. And this is simply symmetrical on both sides. If they get GSPLI, we know they will get released, which means they are likely going to repeat as down the government bench we proved to you. And B, we do not need closure between victims and offenders. Victims probably don't even want to see their face again because it will cause more trauma and PTSD. And all the victim wants is revenges which our side fulfills. And that is the right closure for victims. So my first class is which system actually creates real change. Opposition repeatedly tells us that prison is better because it gives criminals a second chance to change their lives. But this argument only works if prison actually creates meaningful rehabilitation. But in reality, prison very often fails to produce genuine moral change, and many offenders leave prison without ever truly confronting the harm they caused. And they serve their sentence, but psychologically they remain disconnected from their crime. And they rationalize their actions, blame the victim, or convince themselves that the harm was not that severe. And they are basically completing their punishment without developing the empathy necessary to prevent future violence. So here, the main point shouldn't be on whether criminals deserve a second chance or not. It should be what kind of system actually creates the conditions for real change. And here, our side clearly wins. Under our model, perpetrators are forced to directly experience the suffering they inflicted. They feel the fear, the trauma, and the helplessness that their victim experienced by themselves. And this destroys the psychological distance that many offenders rely on to justify their actions. And once someone personally experiences the trauma they caused, it becomes far harder to minimize or rationalize the harm. That confrontation creates genuine moral reflection, which is much stronger foundation for behavioral change than simply spending time in prison. So when opposition says prison offers a second chance, we agree that rehabilitation is important, but the crucial difference is opposition is offering offenders time to change, while government forces offenders to understand why they must change. And that distinction matters enormously because real rehabilitation requires empathy and recognition of harm, and without that understanding, prison simply becomes a waiting period rather than a transformative process, as the opposition keeps mentioning. And under our policy, offenders are far more likely to develop the empathy necessary to avoid repeating their crimes. So if the goal is truly to give offenders the opportunity to become better people, the government model actually creates a stronger pathway to rehabilitation. Opposition calls prison a second chance, but a second chance only matters if offenders genuinely understand what they did wrong. And our model is the one that ensures they do. So once again, opposition is giving criminals time to change, which is not even ensured, while government gives them the understanding necessary to actually change. The second question is that opposition tries to frame our policy as cruel or excessive because it forces perpetrators to experience suffering. But they are misunderstanding what justice is really meant to do. Justice is not simply about fixing and removing criminals from society. Justice is about holding individuals accountable for the harm they have caused and ensuring fairness where individuals receive what they are due. Under opposition's world, punishment is largely disconnected from the actual suffering inflicted. A perpetrator might torture someone and destroy their psychological well-being and permanently traumatize them. Yet the system simply assigns a number of years in prison, and this number is often arbitrary. It does not reflect the depth of the victim's suffering. More importantly, it allows perpetrators to emotionally distance themselves from what they did, and they sit in prison surrounded by other offenders, often rationalizing their behavior or minimizing the consequences of their actions. And genuine confrontation with the victim's experience will never happen in opposition's world. And our representation fundamentally changes that. When perpetrators experience the suffering they cause, They are forced to confront the reality of their actions, the fear, their helplessness, the psychological trauma, the loss of control. This creates true moral accountability because the punishment directly reflects the harm inflicted. Opposition might say punishment should not involve suffering, but this argument ignores an important fact that heinous crimes already involve immense suffering, but is suffered only by the victim. The real question judges must ask is whether justice should acknowledge that suffering or ignore it. Under opposition, the justice system effectively is just saying, oh, your trauma will be translated into a present sentence for the offender. And under our side, the justice system says the harm you suffered matters enough that the perpetrator must fully understand it. And this difference is crucial because justice is not only about what happens to perpetrators, justice is also about what message society sends to victims. And if the system treats their suffering as something that can simply be converted into a prison sentence, it reduces the gravity of what happened. And our policy instead ensures that punishment is proportional and morally coherent. Judge, when we step back and weigh the debate, government clearly wins. First, on the question of justice, opposition defends a system where punishment is disconnected from the harm inflicted and where perpetrators can emotionally distance themselves from their crimes. Government, our side, provides a system where punishment directly reflects the suffering caused and forces perpetrators to confront the consequences of their actions. And that is far more morally coherent form of justice. Second, on preventing future harm. Opposition relies on prisons that are not harsher than our world, that often fail to build empathy and frequently fail to rehabilitate violent offenders. Government creates a system that forces offenders to understand the trauma they inflicted, generating both stronger deterrence and greater psychological accountability. Third and last and most importantly, opposition's model largely ignores the emotional reality of victims and focuses on limiting suffering for perpetrators, and our side ensures that the justice system recognizes the suffering of victims and requires perpetrators to confront it directly. At the end of this debate, the question is simple. Should justice primarily protect perpetrators from suffering, or should it hold them fully accountable to the people whose life they harmed? Government clearly chooses for accountability, recognition of victims, and a justice system that takes harm seriously. For these reasons,
All right, thanks a lot, third prop. Can we have the third opposition speaker?
Can you please give me a few seconds to sort out through my notes? Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so my name's Adrian, and I'll be the third speaker for my team. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, judges, to be a pedophile in government world is to be a professional masseuse. You just letting someone that touched a little kid to go out into the world just by the suffering. What is by getting touched back, which he'll probably like it at the end. And that is the core problem in government's world. Government think just because suffering happened, it will feel the same. Here's where I tell you that you are wrong. The level of suffering for each individual is different. For you, you might think it is suffering, you might think it is painful, but to another person, they might think it is ecstasy, they might think it is something to enjoy, and that's where your case fall throughout the entire first, second, and third speech. Now, imagine a world where your kid, judges, imagine your kid or your friends get touched by a random uncle at the street and they can just go away, just as simple as that. That is not the world that we want, and that is not the justice that we are fighting for. Hence why justice is wrong on their side and we win on justice. Now, a few rebuttals. Before I move on to my rebuttals, a few things that I would like to maybe clear out on my first and second speaker speech. Firstly, my first speaker, I've already told you that perpetrators will have a different perspective on this kind of this kind of heinous crimes that they do. What do she mean by this? She's basically telling you that just because you think that them killing someone is bad, they might think it is something to be glorified. Just because you think that they rape a girl is bad, they might think it is something good. Why do I say so? Let me give you an example. For you, you might think raping a girl is bad, but for them, it is something good. Why? Because they think that they are giving the girl a chance to touch a guy. See, where the perspective of a guy, the perspective of a criminal is different because they themselves are criminal. Like your first speaker already told you they are a psychopath or whatever. So now I'll move on to my rebuttals. For the first speaker, I would say that he's an absolutism. Why? Because he always say that this thing is gonna happen, this will definitely happen, that will definitely happen. And for the second speaker, they are definitely in denial because they never accept whatever we say, and they are just denying everything and try to point out her way without even accepting what we want to say. And that is not a debate, that is just you complaining about what you want and not caring about the opponents. Now, for the third speaker, it's basically a straw man. Her whole speech has been straw manning what we want to say, and these are the three main problems throughout first, second, and third speaker. Now, moving on to the first speaker. The first thing, the main core problem is that the first speaker believed that something will definitely happen, but we believe that the only thing that is confirmed is death. And other than that, there's nothing confirmed, hence why your case fall. Why do I say so? They think that, every serial killers, every people that do heinous crime is going to be serial killers. Someone that think that they're a psychopath or whatever. So we tell you that you're wrong. Yes, that do happen, but there's also a case where people do heinous crime out of accidental reason. For example, he was protecting himself and then he accidentally killed the other guy. And that is considered heinous crime. Why? Because he killed someone. And secondly, he somehow believed that his mechanism will work, and that is doubling down. And we tell you that okay, one, it does not work because we have already told you by our PI that in the motion it stated that this house will convict the perpetrators of heinous crime to experience the suffering of their victim. Suffering of their victim. Hear that clearly and please read the motion. And secondly, sure, let me take you at your best case. Even if we say that you can double down, you can even triple down. Let's say you can even triple down or double down. It still wouldn't work. Why? Because like I already told you, explained to you, the level of suffering is different for everyone. So even if you double down, they still wouldn't feel the exact same. Like even if the exact same suffering wouldn't mean that much to them, because everyone think differently, everyone feel differently. And secondly, they believe that the morality and justice on their side will win just because because they feel suffering, they are somehow going to change and they're going to become, they're going to understand the level of suffering that they put out into someone else and they're going to change and become a better person. We tell you that you're wrong because nothing is confirmed. And secondly, this kind of people will just see it as a get out of jail card and continue doing it in the future. Now, for the second speaker, I believe that she's in denial because whatever we say, that she'll never accept whatever we say when we already told you that doubling down is not something that is true because the motion already stated so, but she still say that we did not answer her properly or somehow that we are the one in the wrong. But sure, I already answered that. So moving on, she said that on our side, we will only get more victims because the perpetrators is going to stay in jail, for example, 20 years and going to go out of jail after that and continue to do the crime. Two things. One, even if that were to happen, yeah, sure. Even if there is a case that the perpetrators go out and continue to do the crime, like my first speaker already told you, they will have the consequences still, and they will feel the suffering later on, which is they're going to have like longer time in the jail, or they're going to have like even as big as life sentences. And secondly, if you assume that on our side, our perpetrators cannot change even after living 20 to 30 years in jail, why should we assume that on your side people would change if they feel suffering? Here, we already give you kindness by accepting your point, but you are not doing the same. Please do a debate, not complain about what you want to say. Now, moving on to the third speaker is he strawman what my second speaker already told you. My second speaker never specifically told you that all they're gonna get is life sentences. He just said that the amount of jail time is going to be very long. Hence why they will have more time to think about the crimes that they do, and secondly, they're gonna actually suffer in prison because they're not going to be in prison alone. There will still be someone else in prison. So if a guy is a pedophile, he go to prison, he will get beat up, he will get raped by other prisoners. Hence why he will actually feel more level of suffering, and that is why we win. We will win on the case of suffering. Now, moving on to my clashes, I have three. One, which side brings better justice? Secondly, which side helps society? And third, which side care for the people? One, which side bring better justice? By upholding proper justice is by caring about both the perpetrators and both the victims. What do I mean by this? On the government world, when you let a person go just by them feeling the same suffering, it does not mean that other people in society is going to look at them the same. People are going to think that, oh, that guy killed, even if he never did his time. I will not believe him because he killed someone before. However, when you compare it to someone that already did that time, that is already in jail for 20 to 30 years, you are more reluctant to believe in him, and you wouldn't be so doubtful as on government work. So you do not care about the perpetrators. You only care about punishing the perpetrators as much as possible, and that is not justice. And secondly, which side actually helps society? It is on our side, because like my second speaker already told you, we have a higher chance of rehabilitation, because the people will actually do their time and they will actually suffer in prison, which is much more severe rather than just feeling the same suffering as the victim, because they have other factors such as being in jail with someone else, some other criminals, and they actually have a higher chance of rehabilitate. And when they do rehabilitate, now you're going to let them go in society and actually be someone productive, be someone that can actually help society. What do I mean by this? We have examples such as Robert Downey Jr. being an actor after doing his time. And even if you want to tell me that Robert Downey Jr. did not do a heinous crime, there is still other examples, for example, Don King or even Michael Vick, that did their time and become someone famous afterwards. And thirdly, which side actually care for the people? We believe that it's on our side, because on our side, we do not let them just go out and create a sense of resentment, like my second speaker already told you. And on our side, we actually care about the perpetrators who have to be monitored, and the victim is safe from have protection from the perpetrators. I'll proud to oppose.
All right, I'd like to thank the third speaker of the opposition and thank all of the speakers that gave their substantive speeches. I'd like to invite the opposition reply to begin the set of replies.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Can you give me a few seconds to organize my notes? Thanks. 10 seconds. Hi. So I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So before I even go into comparative of both sides cases, let's call out a few technical stuff that happened during the speeches. So first of all, they called us out for straw manning the amount of jail time. It's always been a long amount of jail time for let's say at least 10 years for a long time now, because that's how heinous the crimes are. When you talk about heinous crimes, we are talking about crimes that involve killing. You won't go into jail for 5 years and come out again. It's going to take a long time. In fact, on their side, it's even worse, because they just have to experience the amount of suffering their victims experience. And even if it's times 2, if the amount of time is short, and let's say it's a killer, right? They killed someone, and the amount of experience they get, and the amount of time of punishment they have is very few compared to what they have in jail time. So it is still, so time is something that's exclusively on our side only, where we give them a lot of time to think about what they've done and think about rehabilitation and how to get help from people who actually can help professionally. Okay, second of all is that they never engage on how they give closure to individuals who don't want or see doubling down on punishment, and how they're able to prevent any resentment from the perpetrators or any revenge that might happen from the perpetrator's side. Okay, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so let's say that, okay, these criminals they don't feel any resentment and they don't want to get any revenge. These perpetrators will suffer even more, even if they want to have a change of heart. Everything will go against them, even if they want to have a change of heart, and you're just causing them to be less likely be able to live a normal life afterwards. And now the victims will still not have any trust in the system, because the perpetrators are walking out in the city at the same place as they are, and you give them less time to actually heal before they see the perpetrators again. So third thing is that they gave us a wrong mechanism, as this motion clearly states as suffering of the victims. But it's okay. Let's take them in the best case, where they are able to double down the criminal's experience of torture, where they might not suffer. But there's still a chance that they might not suffer as much as the victim because everyone sees suffering differently. Okay, so moving on to a few stuff that happened during the speech. Let's talk about a few stuff that are exclusively on our side only. So first of all, I already said before, which is time given to perpetrators and victims to rehabilitate and to think about what happened and giving them time to heal themselves. So victims need time to actually heal from the trauma they experienced. When you give them 6 months of experiencing pain because you times two and it was 3 months before, you still give them not enough time. People cannot heal completely from their trauma in 6 months. These trauma are probably going to be very, very bad because these are heinous crimes you're talking about. It's going to be lifelong trauma that they won't be able to heal. And on your side, you're just giving them the punishment and they'll experience this suffering and you can never make sure whether they can rehabilitate because afterwards, you don't really monitor them. You free them because you don't give them any jail time. And it's way harder on your side for people to monitor what is happening to the perpetrators or the victims. Moving on is the part where they gave us a lot of. So the main part is rehabilitation. Which side does it better is on our side. Why? Because we give them more time. For rehabilitation to happen, you need time. And time is exclusively on our side. On your side, yes, you do give time, but that time is never going to be enough because the amount of suffering that happens to them, even if they double down, and let's say it happens for years, you're treating this girl for years, if you double down, is maybe you treat this girl wrongly for 20 years. If you double down, it's 40 years. It is still not enough time. On our side, we have the chance of them getting life sentences. On your side, it will never happen unless they like bully this girl for the rest of their life. Okay, so on our side, victims are more likely to get more closure, more time to heal. And on our side, we are able to prove to you through our burden of proof, we are able to complete what we want to do today, which is first of all, prove to you that more violence won't solve the violence that is happening now. We are giving more rehabilitation. And third of all, the after effects of the sentence will be better on our side. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Opposition reply for that final mark, and I'd like to invite the proposition reply to give the 4 minutes, 15 seconds address.
Okay, I'm just getting my timer up. Okay. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. The burden of this debate was less repetition for these perpetrators to commit heinous crimes and safety for victims. Our motto and stance was very clear. A, we trade off the fact that harshness and immorality that the perpetrators with the unlikelihood of repetition, and that comes with this harshness. B, we double the amount of experience of suffering to increase intensity to guarantee that it would not happen again. C, before they get released to society, we hire psychologists to examine if they are mentally better to think properly and react properly in society. I want to pinpoint all the contradictions and flaws that opposition said that wins us the entire debate and how we responded throughout. On the harshness of both sides, the opposition stance was clear. The harshness is less harsh for jail, but the long time will exclude them from society. However, when they get released from jail, they will get a second chance, and even if they do commit crime again, they will get more consequences. How do we respond? 5 points here. 1, on their point of when they repeat, they get more consequences. Yes, we agree, but our side stops the repetition in the first place as our treatment is harsher. Therefore, more empathy and realization as our first speaker proved to you how. This also means they fail to fulfill the burden of the repetition by taking a soft stance as we repeatedly told you down the bench. 2, long time doesn't guarantee change in mind. They tell you that the long time imprisonment will change you, but also say that our side won't change the perpetrator as this person is a psychopath. What do we miss from the opposition? We miss the mechanization of when then on their side the psychopath will change with less harshness. We additionally call out down the bench saying that long time doesn't necessarily mean anything because all prison does is exclude these psychopaths temporarily. We miss the mechanization at the end of the day, and as they don't respond how in long time will change the psychopath while our harsher side doesn't. 3. Prison's harshness versus suffering harshness. We tell you from DPM to WHIP that prison's harshness is nowhere near our experience of harshness because 1, prison provides you basic life necessity. 2, their WHIP says that, oh, you get beat up from prison, but then if you get suffer from prison, why don't you suffer on our side? This is quite symmetrical. 3, our side of suffering is better for the realization as they literally do the same action that this perpetrator commit. 4, rehab on their side, imprisonment. They say that they have more rehab because of the time, but we again respond down the bench by saying prisons don't really do anything as its only job is to exclude immature people and psychopath people from society temporarily. And they also never explain how this works when they introduce, this is literally when they introduce it in the WHIP. 5, what did we prove at the end of the day while side opposition contradicts themselves? We told you 2 points. 1, harshness and the intensity brings in less repetition as empathy exists and offenders truly feel and experience what they did because it is so harsh. This is only exclusive on our side and it fulfills the burden of no repetition. 2, we guarantee victims emotional closure and psychological safety as we explain to you why victims have the incentive to get revenge and they would feel a little better if their perpetrator got the same harsh, disgusting treatment as they did. Okay, now, then why do we at the end of the day win this debate? 2 reasons. 1, we fulfilled the 2 burdens of A, no repetition of this heinous crime due to the harshness and emotional pain the perpetrators get. B, emotional safety for victims as they know they got revenge and as they know they won't do this again. 2, we win on all the clashes that opposition side actually outlines. A, on justice, we bring more justice as we do not have repetition while side opposition have the possibility to. But sure, we can be a little bit more with the treatment, but again, we are trading this off for long-term justice for victims. B, helping society. If perpetrators repeat on their side while we guarantee no repetition, we help society as a whole better, getting rid of these heinous criminals and psychopaths. For these reasons, side government, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to the proposition reply, and congratulations to both teams making it to the semifinals, and good job in this round. I guess the result will be announced in the main room. Thanks once again for the debate.
Thank